This is Experience Imagination, a themed entertainment podcast by FALCON'S Creative Group.
Story connects people to the experience.
Every aspect of creativity is brought together.
We wanted to do something different and fresh.
There are so many different disciplines that are involved in this industry.
Nothing will get you further than your passion.
This entire process is just making us better designers.
We're really pushing the envelope.
Welcome to Experience Imagination. I'm Audrey DeLong. Today's topic is the power of fandom. We get inspired by fandom on a daily basis at FALCON'S, but especially this time of year because of Anime Expo and Comic-Con, two huge gatherings for some of the most enthusiastic fans on the planet. There are many fandom mediums that we're not going to talk about today, like sports, fashion, and music. I would love to, but we're limited in time, and we really want to stay focused on what FALCON'S does best, which is themed entertainment. So today, we're going to explore this slice and maybe a couple more fandom slices with my guests, Eric Calderon, our Executive Vice President of Creative Development, Jeff Gomez, co-founder and CEO of Starlight Runner Entertainment, and Gary Pope, co-founder of Kids Industries. All three come with their own unique perspectives. Jeff is a leading expert in the fields of story world development, franchise management, narrative design, and corporate narrative. He has worked with Netflix, Industrial Light and Magic, Marvel Comics, Electronic Arts, Coca-Cola, and Disney, to name a few. Gary Pope co-founded Kids Industries in the UK in 2002. His company has worked with some of the most recognized brands out there, including McDonald's, Royal Caribbean, the Pokemon Company, Universal, BBC, World Wildlife Fund, and Disney. Eric mainly worked in animation before joining our flock, serving in a variety of creative roles for Warner Brothers Animation, 20th Century Fox Film, Sega, and MTV Animation. He also ran his own independent production company called Wild Boar Media. I'm excited for this conversation. All right, well, welcome everyone. First of all, Eric Calderon. I introduced you in the intro a little bit, but hello again, and welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here again.
All right, and then we have Gary Pope. You've been on twice now, and welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. This is my second time.
Yes, and Jeff, we are talking to you for the first time on Experience Imagination. Thanks so much for joining us.
Fantastic to be here.
All right, so I could just read the common definition of the word fandom, but that would be extremely boring. So I'm going to ask each of you for your definitions, but in a different way. I'll start with Eric. You've attended Comic-Con many years in a row now. I talked a little bit about it in the intro. You've also been to Anime Expo a bunch of times. So how does fandom play out at those conventions?
Well, I think the easiest way to start is that fandom is not a monolith. There's going to be a lot of different ways that people express themselves, but maybe the easiest way to summarize both Comic-Con and Anime Expo is it's really one of the largest safe spaces you can find in order to express yourself from any level to the most minimal to the absolute maximum of, taking those franchises and those brands and the stories that you love and really inheriting them as part of your own persona and kind of merging the two in a place that other people will acknowledge and see and celebrate with you. So I think fandom and fans is a great combination of I can love something, I can have it as part of me, but here's an entire community of people who can be part of that wider family.
Community is a really good word, Eric. So Jeff, I'm gonna throw over to you. I read on your LinkedIn profile that the work you do deepens engagement and results in mass audience approval, fan loyalty, and increased revenue. So you know a thing or two about fandom. What's really at the root of it? What draws people into these communities?
The bottom line is love. I mean, fandom is about people who are drawn to certain kinds of, whether they're intellectual properties or sports teams or whatever, they are resonating with deep desires in our hearts. For something like the fandom that we're talking about, story world fandom, entertainment property fandom, which, I was at some of the very first pop culture conventions ever, Star Trek in the early 1970s. My heart sang because it was unbelievable that this many other people who responded to this story world, we're all in the same place and essentially can speak the same language when, for the most part, I felt so isolated. And so that really gave birth to the kind of fandom I think that we're talking about here.
Yeah, this is like grand realization that you're not alone. There are a lot
But
of
you're not
people who
alone.
think like you do.
That's right.
So, Gary, you created the fandom model, and your company offers services specifically related to fandom. So, talk about this fascinating world from your perspective.
We tend to think of fandom as the actions of a giver to a receiver, the thing that what a story world conveys towards that person, that individual. But actually, it's different to that, isn't it? It's a dance between the two, between the giver and the receiver, between the story world and the consumer of that world who chooses to immerse themselves in it. And up until about the age of 7, right around the world, we're all following exactly the same developmental pathway. So notwithstanding language as a barrier, we all experience exactly the same thing, which is one of the reasons why preschool fandom particularly travels so well. And, I defer to Jeff and to Eric on grown-up stuff, but I would contend that one of the reasons why myth and epic works globally as well is because that's, as you said, Jeff, it's deep inside us. It's in our heart. It's there. So, it's a very human thing, fandom, isn't it? I suppose is what I'm saying.
Right.
I'd love to make a distinction because, having you both is so fascinating because, Gary, you, from my knowledge, really focus on family and the younger end, and Jeff, you're really kind of one of the experts in the world of tween and up. In my mind, I make the distinction of a preschool engagement being a little bit separate than kid to adult fandom. And here's why, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. When I think about a preschool engagement, I think about the limited cognitive abilities of infant to preschool to bridge, and just kind of putting the world together and kind of understanding your environment and feeling safe and understanding boundaries and rules and what is right is wrong. And I think when you start to get into that past bridge up into kids, I feel we start to enter the early parts of where Jeff's world takes in, which is, what are these story worlds, these epics, these characters that we carry through our life. So do you guys see it similar, or do you feel like it's a much more fluid engagement when we go from infant the whole way up to preteen?
I think I disagree, Eric. I disagree.
Give it to me.
I think it is fluid. It is a journey from birth through to death, of which our cognition that you refer to is developing, and we take on what we're capable of taking on at that stage, and that suits us just fine. And then we get a little bit better and a little bit older and a little bit more able, and then we go up again and we can take a little bit more. It's not about a younger child not being able to take on more cognitively. They're taking on what's right for them. So I think, comparatively, it's the same. It's just at a more appropriate level.
I see. Jeff, where do you stand on this?
The one thing that we're very cognizant of at Starlight Runner, that there is a kind of dividing line between children and tween, because there is a natural inclination, once you're a big person, to reject the content that you've enjoyed up until that point. It could be 6, 7, 8 years old, and then suddenly Barney is no good. It happens again at the middle teens, where the things you liked as a tween are no good anymore either. But yeah, there are some distinctions.
Yeah, I also think where I will disagree with myself and further agree with you, Gary, a 2-year-old can be a fan and they can have true fandom. It just takes a different form and has a different set of rules when you're 2. Thank you for expanding my definition.
We are lucky, guys, that people are holding on to these childish things for much, much longer into their adulthood.
Because we're kidults. We're finally kidults,
Yes.
Funny word, stupid word,
Yeah.
Just me and you that like toys, that's all.
So adults that basically have behaviors of children.
That's right? Correct, Audrey, and it's okay.
Adult.
Yes, well, I have the behavior of a child, and I'm okay
We all
with that.
should. I'm not against that.
It's important.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about some specific experiences that Jeff and Gary have had So, Jeff, you were a consultant on Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. That's where fans can live out their own Star Wars stories at Disneyland and Disney's Hollywood Studios. What do you think true fans are most looking for in these types of experiences, and how did you help guide the designers to deliver this?
Well, you picked a toughie.
You're welcome.
If I made any significant contribution, it was to implore Disney to step forward in terms of verisimilitude. When you go to the Disney parks, largely there's a branded feeling to everything. You understand the artifice, but you're so in love with the properties that you enjoy being surrounded by the artifice. But I was observing the success of the Wizarding World, which was a chance for the Harry Potter fan to actually visit Hogwarts and the locales around Hogwarts, to feel as if they're participating in the story world as opposed to, going on a themed ride of the story world. So I said my recommendation was to make Galaxy's Edge, which wasn't called that at the time, it was basically Star Wars Land, to make it a real place so that you felt like you were walking through a planet in the Star Wars universe. And they really did kind of stick to that aspect of what I was recommending.
Nice. All right, so let's turn it to Gary, because you have your own Star Wars experience. You did a fandom study that Disney hired you to do. What can you tell us about that?
Not a lot. What can I tell you about that? Look, I am a long-term Star Wars fan. I was there in 1977. I know I don't look old enough, but I was. Our task was to look at the broad fan base, from the very youngest to the very oldest, and try and delineate that fandom. So we got to work on a very ethnographic piece of work. So ethnography is where you really sort of embed with people and you literally become their shadow for a period of time. And so our team met some of the strangest people on the planet, and I'm only half joking, and were immersed in their fandom, in every iota of their fandom, from tattoos to cars that they'd redesigned to be representative of Boba Fett and so on, through to their collection of mannequins or games or whatever it might be. And then to talk really earnestly with these, and I'm going to call them this because they are naive experts, right? They are absolutely expert in their fandom, but they don't really understand our world of constructing that. So they give you the most pure insight you can possibly hope for. And we did that in Germany, France, the Middle East, in South Africa, the UK, so on and so forth. And there was, broadly speaking, a holistic response. It was very, very joined up. And having taken that data, we were then able to say, okay, so these are the product categories that are working. These are the kind of things that people want to engage in. But more importantly, this is how that might impact content.
Yeah. Jeff, I want to ask you about Pirates of the Caribbean, because Eric tipped me off that you created the Transmedia Bible for that. So talk about transmedia storytelling and how you approached that specific project.
It was really one of the proto projects for my company, because the challenge faced by the Disney company and Pirates of the Caribbean was that first movie was tremendously successful, but it was not a generator of licensing and merchandising for the company. So the second and third films, the edict came down. We need to be able to leverage this colossal investment. You know, it was $400 or $500 million for that second and third film in production together. That required a fundamental understanding of the property to all of the different divisions of the company. It's kind of a hard property to get. You know, why was it successful? Who's Jack Sparrow? Is he an evil pirate? Is he a clown? How does this world work? What's its mythology? What other stories can be told in this world? So that became a bit of our responsibility to work with the Disney company and not just create a kind of franchise Bible for it, the pirates' mythology, but to help Disney create an intellectual property clearinghouse. They called it the Pirates Task Force, in order to implement the IP in a consistent manner across the entire company. And that was really, really successful. I mean, Disney marketing was, spearheading it and did a wonderful job. And it was great being a part of that.
So they wanted to take the Pirates of the Caribbean story and expand it to basically sell merchandise, toys, T-shirts, umbrellas, I don't care, whatever, to recover their costs to make the films?
But also to tell the story effectively across multiple platforms. Not many people know this, but out of Italy, Milan, there are Disney comic books, which are colossally lucrative for the company. The Pirates content that they had was entirely inconsistent with the movie franchise. And it led to some disappointment amongst the fans. That's not Jack Sparrow. What do you do about juvenilizing kind of this dark world? How do you do that properly without alienating the young adult fan base? Those were things that we took on in terms of challenge.
I remember very clearly with my lad, him getting a tricorn hat with the silly hair and becoming Jack Sparrow as a result of the work that Jeff did. And that slice of identification, that aspirational, I suppose, an aspirational driver in Jeff's language, but this sort of emulatory identification with Jack Sparrow and off he goes. Fantastic. He's creating his own version of that Caribbean world. It's just wonderful. So there is a real purpose that consumer products can serve that sometimes people don't necessarily appreciate as much as maybe they should.
I want to circle it back to themed entertainment and theme parks in general. What are the most successful theme parks doing to cater to their fans? Gary, let's start with you.
I think the answer to that from my perspective is really simple, and that is that they stayed true to what Joe Pine said in 1998, wasn't it, in the experience economy. He said something along the lines of, in the new experience economy, companies must realize that they make memories, not goods. Right? So what those two behemoths are able to do with the support of companies like FALCON'S and the talents of Jeff and so on, is to actually translate a 2D, for want of a better expression, into something which is 3D. And that hits you right in the periodontal atrium.
Ouch. Would that be painful?
Yeah, don't punch me in the periodontal.
I don't have anything to do with that.
Honestly, you get it right, it's lovely.
Yeah. Well, I think what you said is really fascinating, because I think when you're talking about the brands of individual memory makers, the wonder and joy and magic of a theme park is almost irreplaceable, and in some ways much more multidimensional and effective than a film and a TV series because of the multisensory memory that you have.
To add to that, Eric, and I think you know where I'm headed, something has changed with regard to how fandom can be dealt with. Savvy entertainment companies are realizing that fandom is no longer passive, and that it isn't even simply a matter of hoping that they say nice things about you on social media. And I think what both Disney and Universal have become good at, perhaps more so than in their movie divisions, is engaging in dialogue their loyal theme park goers. They do this through the development of specific types of packages. They do this by getting you to subscribe so that you're updated on the development of new rides and attractions, letting superfans into the parks at odd hours and letting them be first to try new things in the parks. Those are things that allow for tremendous loyalties and memory making to be developed with the fan.
What you made me realize there, Jeff, is our fandom model has three big sections, right? As what we call self-definition with a bunch of other categories underneath it. It has social amplification, but what you're talking about is this bit that we call interaction moments, right? You were talking about product, you were talking about frequency, you're talking about emotion, you're talking about participation. Those happen to be the four sprongs. Sprongs, is that a word? I'll go with it. Four sprongs.
It could be in the UK for all I know.
Yeah, is it a UK word for
we
tenant?
Say what we like. Yeah, that's right. Emotion, frequency, participation, product, that's what they're doing right. That got me quite excited. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, but really, Gary, it's the vitality of listening. When you're listening to your fans, particularly the most vociferous of them, and acknowledging them and validating what it is that they have to say, even if you don't always agree with it, and celebrating their input when you do agree with it is something that is a treasure to your audience, and it needs to be done more.
I think I want to put a post in the ground here and make a stand on an idea, and you can challenge me on this, but I feel the way that especially North American fandom can find its way out of its rut is that we have to stop deconstructing ourselves. I think we need to establish brands and franchises with a truly whole approach, that we believe that the characters within our stories mean what they say, are driven towards something that they want. And if deconstruction needs to happen, let parody shows, let other people make those. But when we start to deconstruct and parody ourselves, we destroy the foundation of our own brand.
I recently gave a speech to this point to a big entertainment company, and I said, stop finding corruption in the heroic organizations that represent the heart of this company.
Wow. Wow.
Don't do it. Stop making the heroes the bad guys. I know it's the easy go-to, but we don't want that. We want heroes. We want characters that reflect aspirational value systems. And if you keep challenging that by saying, look at these fallen or corrupt or decrepit characters that used to represent the apex of heroism, if this is what you're depicting for us, it's depressing.
Yeah, that sounds like a big mistake, a big no-no, if you're trying to please your fandom and please the common denominator. And I was going to ask you guys this, outside of that kind of thing, turning a hero into a villain, what other mistakes can a company make with their fandom to the point where they alienate certain people?
Great question.
With the explosion of media platforms, streaming and things like that, a lot of these companies, video games as well, are always in a mad dash. So when you combine the speed to market with the fact that there is an obsession with youth and a need to communicate with youth, writers' rooms are filled with people who are, admittedly not that experienced. When you combine both of those, you are not getting a design sensibility to the product anymore. You're getting people who are moving as fast as humanly possible, and you actually can watch the inconsistencies and thematic jumbling in the content itself, or bowing to the algorithm, right? If you watch any Netflix movie or series, every 15 minutes, somebody sums up everything that happened in the last 15 minutes, and that weakens the content and generates short-term thinking.
If we're talking about where fandom's going and are we going to be successful as creators and companies and chaining new fandom to new properties, I feel like we have to also lean towards the behavior patterns of where kids are at in terms of the screens they're watching. If you think about it just in this very simple pattern, the smaller the screen, the more profitable right now. So if you're talking about a movie theater size screen, it's a very difficult, faded, aging marketplace. You're talking about the TV screen, you talk about the computer screen, and then the YouTube screen, and then the YouTube window. Everything's leaning towards a smaller and smaller screen. And I feel like as storytellers, we haven't really found a way to meet those kids where they're at and find a way to get them extracted from the smaller screens into a more valuable story. And I do believe there is the right message and story for a TikTok video. I think there is the right message and story for a YouTube short, for a podcast, for a TV show. We just have to be a lot more nimble in how we write and create and iterate for these platforms to then extract them out to other things. And we're just not there yet. I feel like it's all happening so fast. And we're dismissive, but we should be, studious.
And brands, younger brands, seem to think that this is the way to do it, right? Kids want short, they want snappy, they want it now. Let's go, next. So you get this doom scroll, dopamine fix. And the thing about cortisol, which is released when we do that, is it's a memory inhibitor, right? So that's why you go for the next one. how on earth are you going to develop an understanding of a character or story, even if it is made for 2 minutes or whatever else, if the next thing you're doing is thinking, where am I going to get my next hit? It's bonkers for storytelling. It's bonkers. It's wrong.
Really is.
It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge for us, for fandom.
You know, I want to talk about fans' influence, circling back to this topic, because we've seen a lot of examples of fans coming to save shows, coming to the rescue of their favorite shows are canceled. I'm going to start a campaign and this show's going to stay on the air. Gosh darn it. But what other ways can fans influence IPs and communities, and basically in the sense of like in-person experiences or a themed experience? Do you think it's happening?
Well, I can give you one answer, and I think it's timely. You know, Comic-Con and Anime Expo don't work because of the exhibitors' tables. They work because the fans make the environment. You know, the experience itself of going to these places and connecting with fans, that's where fans really have power. You know, that they can take that story into their persona and now make it part of who they want to present themselves to other people. And I don't think after the initial media is made that the companies and brands have to worry that much about it. If they do their job right, it should have an acceleration and a fertilizer that someone else can grow something new out of. That's what I believe.
Yeah. Gary and Jeff?
If people are empowered to enjoy what they love, then that becomes transmissible, doesn't it? Love begets love, and you share what you love, and so everybody has a nice time. And those safe environments that you talk about, where I seem to remember somebody dressing up as a very famous animation director from a certain Japanese studio at one point, at one particular
And bringing up my cosplay.
Oh.
Think about the never-ending story. Think about Dark Crystal. Think about Labyrinth and Time Bandits. Those were movies that did not do necessarily very well for their times. But the people that went to those movies, the fans of those movies, it was pure magic. It really hit them hard. And there was this passionate, small fan base, and people who grew up never forgetting those theatrical experiences that are fueling the return of all four of those properties in recent years.
And actually, Jeff, you said the most important thing. The basic cycle of nerddom is the fans of today will be the filmmakers of tomorrow, will be the game designers of tomorrow. So the effect that they have is really, it's a 10 to 15 to 20 year cycle. You know, Taika Waititi releasing his version of Time Bandits today is directly because as a young person, he saw Time Bandits and he had his mind blown away. So our job as creators is to blow away those minds now. And the fruits of that will ultimately, the biggest fruits will be 20, 30 years later when someone's like, hey, Falcons, that theme park that you designed that I went to when I was 7, that is why I'm in the theme park industry, is because of that thing. So that's like the ultimate circle we all hope for.
Right. I could think of I just want to bring this up because I was a fan myself, but the Rocky Horror Picture Show is a great example of a certain fandom.
Yep.
And they just kept going to the theater because it's so interactive. You know the movie. No, the movie's not a great movie, but you know every line of it because you've seen it so many times. You're throwing the rice, you're yelling at the screen, you're filling in the blanks for characters, right?
Well, let me correct you the most American way possible. It's not a good movie. It's an awesome movie.
It's not an Oscar winner, let's just say. But that fandom was so inspired to create something that they almost created a movement, because the Rocky Horror Picture Show as a movie, it's a standalone movie, it's not going to do anything.
Correct.
It could have died and never to be heard from again, but it became a cult classic because people engaged in it in a live way.
Yep. I think that's it.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right. So, that's going to wrap it up, actually. So I want to thank you guys. Thank you, Eric, for joining us.
You're welcome. No problem. Love being here.
All right. And Jeff, where are you calling from today, actually, Jeff?
I'm working out of my Manhattan office today.
All right. Thanks for calling in from New York. And Gary from the UK.
Yeah, thank you ever so much. It's been so nice. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much indeed.
All right. So before we go, Jeff and Gary, tell us how people can find out more about you and what your companies are doing.
Jump on my socials at Jeff_Gomez on X and LinkedIn.
Yep. You have a lot of great posts on LinkedIn. Of course, I had to stalk all my guests, and that's what I do. But Excellent. Thank you. And Gary, I was looking at your Kids Industries website. There's a lot of valuable information on there. I encourage our listeners to check that out too if they want to learn more about fandom.
Thank you very much. Kidsindustries.com. That's terribly American, isn't it? We don't do that. Yeah, kidsindustries.com. Yeah, that's it. Check it out, as they say.
Nice. Well, thank you guys. Till next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Before we bring this episode about fandom to a close, I want to thank all of you for listening, and thanks again to my colleague Eric Calderon for bringing his enthusiasm for fandom to this conversation. I want to give a special thanks to the co-founder and CEO of Starlight Runner Entertainment, Jeff Gomez, and Gary Pope, co-founder of Kids Industries. We'll be back next month for an all-new episode. Thank you for listening to Experience Imagination, a Falcons Creative Group production. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. Be sure to check out falconscreativegroup.com and follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you have ideas for future episodes or just want to drop us a message, send an email to podcast@falconscreativegroup.com.